Mm,
We welcome you to our channel where we talk about issues of Africa. It has been about 2 weeks now without sharing out any message to you, but
mm,
we would like to welcome you once again. And
mm.
here I am, Joseph Michael Tenua, the Pro African Sage. And don't forget the YouTube channel, Joseph Pro Africa, with my friend, with my brother and colleague. I think he should introduce
Yes.
himself to us.
Actually, hi people. It's good to be back. It has been a rough 2 weeks, and we're a little bit sorry that we've not been putting out this content and letting you to get to know about Africa. But here before you, Timothy Soboga, and we are going to have a really nice time. And I hope you guys enjoy the topic we are going to talk about. Yeah.
Yes, we are looking at the question of climate change in Africa, the question of deforestation in Africa, and how this has been perceived, how this has been understood, and how this is impacting on the entire lifestyle of the African people,
Mm.
how it's impacting on the livelihoods of the people, and probably the possible interventions that we can look at in addressing the question of deforestation, the question of climate change, and the question of food insecurity in Africa, because these are intertwined.
Yeah. They
So
really
we
are.
want to look at the topic and the question of deforestation,
Mm,
how it is perceived, how it
mm.
is understood.
Yeah.
And maybe we shall begin with an understanding, because you realize that oftentimes
Mm,
there are topics that we shall take for granted.
mm.
Deforestation is understood as a cutting down of trees, but how does this translate into causing climate change? How does this translate into preventing a household from having a meal at home?
Mm,
So it's what we want to look at, and maybe with my brother more.
mm.
How do people really understand what deforestation is, at least
Yeah.
from your interaction with them?
So basically, when a person talks about deforestation, you may think it's something that is a cliche, so simple, and it doesn't have any impact. But if you talk about deforestation, simply it's the cutting down of trees and not replacing the trees that have been cut down. So with this, you realize that the forest cover is actually reduced. If let me say, we take an example of Budongo Forest, which is in Uganda, which is the most recent case of massive deforestation. You find out that these people, or loggers, or lumberers, or these people who actually go out to cut these trees, go and cut down trees. They don't even think of replacing it, and they leave that place destroyed. And basically, they do this for economic reasons. Others do it as a way of getting having food on the table, but they forget that deforestation has a domino effect. It has on the environment and the climate of the country and the world in general.
Okay,
Yes.
yes, and at that point, actually, I want to speak like somebody who has been into the fight against the climate change,
Mm,
being the founder and the director for an organization called Fruit Tree Option, where we are looking at the planting of fruit trees.
mm,
In the sense that when we are looking at fruit trees as an option,
mm,
people usually have less move to cut fruit trees,
mm.
because they know they have to keep producing the fruits for the family
Yeah.
and for the children. So even in situations where they will need like firewood,
Mm,
they will easily prune off a branch, and they will
mm,
cut off one branch to have the firewood, as
mm.
in they are pruning. Meanwhile, the tree will keep standing.
Yeah.
However, with the experience that we had from the people in the field when we were talking to different people, you realize that when it comes to cutting nanny fruit trees,
Mm.
it's very easy, because people do not have any value they attach to a nanny fruit tree.
Mm.
We know that from a fruit tree, somebody will know that this is a mango, I'm going to pick mangoes. This
Mm.
is an avocado tree, I'm going to pick some fruits. But with a nanny fruit tree, it becomes very easy, because they have been looking at a tree for the last 5 years. They have been
Mm.
looking at a tree for the last 10 years,
Yeah.
and they don't find something coming out of it. So
Mm.
they take it to be of less value to the environment.
Mm.
And then maybe with the people's understanding of what deforestation is,
Mm.
we don't really come to appreciate how the cutting of one tree can affect the environment, how the cutting of one tree
Mm.
can affect the climate,
Mm.
and how the cutting of one tree can even lead to an increase in diseases that we are
Mm.
having within the communities. So probably from the concept of deforestation,
Mm.
how would we have people understand and appreciate how best we can handle issues of deforestation and how we can keep a better environment?
Yeah. So to add on to what you said, I believe that there is this saying that goes this that rhymes that if nobody matters, then everybody doesn't matter. So if one tree, even if it's one fruit tree matters,
Yes.
and then you say that the other tree is not important, then nothing then matters. So I believe that every tree, whether if it's a fruit tree or it just provides shade or it's just a tree that provides timber, they are all important in
Yes.
that they help to regulate our climate. So speaking about going further into this topic of deforestation, you realize that if you look at deforestation, people think that its only effects is climate change and climate related calamities and catastrophes. No, it's bigger than that. Actually, if you look at World Health Day that was celebrated this year,
Yes.
the theme was looking at how climate change leads to diseases. But basically, we're looking at the aspect of if I cut down a tree, what am I bringing onto the environment and onto my health as a person?
Yes.
So we find out that the Ministry of Health, Tree Adoption Uganda, and World Health Organization really try to show people what it really means by cutting down these trees and what impact they have on our health. Yes, I get there is that big problem called climate change, but I think that we are actually missing a step. You know, when you're really part of nature, you get to see a lot of things that you do not get to experience in different places. For
Yes.
example, right now we're in a natural setting, and I have to say this: I really enjoy the air. But am I going to get this experience if I'm going to sit, let me say, in
In a downtown in
downtown
Kampala.
Kampala or Wandegea,
Yes.
or let me say I'm in traffic jam and then I open the car window, then
Yes.
this taxi is moving, then it removes out that smoke. No, I'm not going to get that experience I'm getting right now.
Yes.
So if you look at the topic of deforestation, why I say that deforestation creates a domino effect, actually domino snowball effect, in that we think that by cutting down one tree or two trees or three trees or five or a million trees, we're not going to see that change here, then and now. It's not going to come boom,
Yes, like
climate change
once.
has happened, boom, new diseases have come out, boom,
Yes.
everything has
There is
has
a food insecurity.
food insecurity
Because
and
yeah,
all
we
of
also
those.
appreciate that even the challenges of climate change that we are facing now have been a summation of the consequences of actions that people have done for generations and generations, hundreds and thousands of years.
Yeah.
But now we are the ones that are suffering the consequences. And the same way, if people would come to appreciate that when I'm cutting a tree today, it's not going to affect me immediately, but I'm creating an adverse impact on the people who are going to come 10 years, 20 years from now. And this is something that probably people have to appreciate. And when you were submitting, actually, I came also to realize that there is really a knowledge gap. But then at the end of the day, how do we bridge this knowledge gap? Because we know very well that we are suffering with climate change, but the actions were done hundreds and thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
These were not done by one person. We can't say that the climate change has come specifically because of this one particular industry, because of this one particular group of people, because of this tribe of people, because of this country. It was a combined effort.
Yeah.
And that means that even in addressing the question of climate change, it must be a combined effort. But then, how do we have the people come on board to participate fully into addressing the question of climate change, especially at this time when we are having a larger number of youth who are able to access information through social media, who are on internet? How would we have these young people embrace the question of climate change that we can together work towards having a better environment?
Now, okay, moving on, I realize that we have an advantage that maybe say people of the 90s or 80s didn't have.
Yes.
Is that we have information, and information can easily be got on mobile phones, and internet is something that is normal to us than it was before. So moving on, if you look at the topic of climate change, now I believe that climate change is as a result of human activities, and one of the human activities that brings this up is deforestation. In that, we believe that yes, we need the trees to make timber, which is going to be used for roofing our houses, which is going to be used for making furniture. But we are forgetting one thing. What next? What next when we chop down these trees? And you get to realize in Uganda, the highest rate of deforestation happens in basically private land. In that
Yes.
these people are going to chop down all the trees, and they forget that by doing this, that in the long run they are
In the
going to
long run, they are
create,
going to be
they are
affected.
going to be affected, and Uganda itself will have to experience climate change.
Yes.
But what does this mean? I think we have to understand one thing. We're not talking something new. People have been learning about deforestation, people have been learning about climate change,
Yes.
but people have not actually
To experience
got to
what
no,
it
not to
is.
got to experience what it is, but they have actually not grasped what it actually entails. We are here talking about this. Your organization,
The option.
Fruit
Yes.
Tree Adoption, has
Yes.
promoted the planting of trees. Thank you very much. You guys have done a really remarkable job.
Yes.
You look at other organizations like Tree Adoption Uganda. Tree Adoption Uganda has also planted trees. They have had this project called Run for Climate. They have
Yes.
planted
Yes. Yes.
trees
Yes.
all over Uganda, especially in Bududa, which is affected by
The landslides.
mudslides.
Yes.
You have to look at what NEMA has done. You have to look at what NFA has done. You have to look at what our entire government has done. But I think we are missing a step. I remember when we were talking, it's like I'm washing a cloth and I put it on a hang line.
Yes.
Then this kid is going to come
And they will remove
drop,
it and drop
drop
it down.
in the dirt and then step on it and have to wash it again.
Yes.
So what am I trying to say is that, you see, there are things that we do not okay, yes, action needs to be taken, but I believe one most important thing is that we need to educate the mind. I'm forgetting education of the mind without educating the heart is virtually useless. What I'm trying to say that we need to teach these people to love the environment.
Love the environment.
Love the environment and know the consequences of actions. You know, the reason why we're called Homo sapiens and the reasons why God gave us dominion over the earth is that we have the ability to think and think of the repercussions of our actions. But right now, if you cut down the trees, you're not actually thinking of the repercussions. There's a time actually before the advent of the face mask, before people
Yes.
started putting on face masks.
Yes.
I
Before
could
COVID-19.
normally see people putting on face masks in China where they're suffering from smoke. But why are they suffering from smoke? It's because that they have cut ties with the natural environment. They have cut down the trees. They have done a lot of things that has had a
Affected.
ripple effect on nature, and it has made things really look so bleak for them. So, what do people need to know? Number one, know quick facts about trees. Let me give you like 3 quick facts. Did you know that trees are actually very immortal? They have actually existed from time immemorial up to current
Yes.
day. They do not die because of of old age. There are
Yeah.
trees that are 1,000 years old, but
And
they are
it's
still standing. But
whether it's raining or
whether
shining.
it's raining, whether it's shining, all of that. Number one, oxygen. Oxygen. Trees provide oxygen. You see, like where I actually thank that we're in this nice breeze, but every time I get to experience this breeze, I'm like, God, I wish every place was
like this.
because of the oxygen. Then number one, number three, we have to look at the fact of them regulating our climate, regulating the bad gases that are in the atmosphere
Yes,
that
the
really
greenhouse gases.
the greenhouse gases that
Yes.
cause global warming. You see,
Yes.
sometimes there are things that don't need to be explained. I don't understand the mechanism of how
Yeah.
trees do this, but you get to realize that these things are actually important. But what is funny, apart from them regulating our climate, helping to provide us food like fruits and everything, what have we done? We have done one thing that is actually unforgivable. We are parting our way from nature. What have we done?
We are already cutting down the trees and we are burning this and that. But actually, from your submission, you really brought out important aspects like the value of trees. It becomes a question of definition. If you understand the value of trees as helping us give us this fresh air, the oxygen, as the trees helping us to reduce the the greenhouse gases that bring up the global warming. That's the way you look at the trees as being advantageous.
Yeah.
But we have that big population that I will refer to as the illiterate community that probably may not understand the mechanism of oxygen and will not understand the question of global warming. But for them, they look at trees as helping them to provide the timber they need, the firewood they need, and to get to trees for burning charcoal. That's how they define the value of trees. But then also it comes to a question of the education system, that maybe would we have an education that would help us appreciate the importance of these trees? For example, when you appreciate that when I cut down one tree, I'm cutting it down on the oxygen supply. When I cut down one tree, I am contributing towards the increased concentration of carbon emissions within
the atmosphere. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, this is going to affect the climate. Until somebody can understand that and appreciate that, when you'll be asking them why they are carrying out deforestation, they will have only the reasons as to why they need the what? They need the firewood and they need the timber. So it becomes a very big question. How do people define trees? Do we look at trees as windbreakers? Do we look at trees as providing shades? Do we look at trees as helping us to cool down the environment?
Yeah.
Or do we look at trees as barely bringing us firewood and timber at the time when we need them? So it becomes a very big question where we need to see that if it's really to sink into our minds and to be understood by even the people within the community that we shall refer to as the illiterate community that does not appreciate the question of oxygen and the mechanisms through which the cutting of trees can even contribute towards an increasing rate of cancer and even increasing cases of malaria as coming as a result of cutting the trees. It wouldn't really make sense to an ordinary person telling them that when you cut a tree, you are increasing the chances of malaria and the chances of cancer. They can't really find a connection. So probably it would require that we have people who have gone through this system and who can understand and break it down. You see, like the Bible. The Bible is a bit hard. You don't take scripture literal like this. But we would have theologians, we would have pastors, we have reverends who are going to help us break down the word. And they will tell you this is what Jesus means by this. What if we had the same thing for climate? That we have people who are going to help us appreciate that, no, when you cut down the tree, this is how it contributes to you getting malaria. So we can attach a higher value onto the trees as compared to looking at them as being available for firewood and charcoal. Maybe if I may ask, what are those agencies and those organizations that would really help in the people appreciating the greater value of trees as compared to being cut for forests?
So, number one, to add on to what you've said, you realize that, let's take an example of Uganda.
Yes.
Realize the reason why 40% of the Ugandan population, unfortunately, is below the poverty. They are poor.
Yeah. And
they resort to cutting down trees in order to get money.
Yeah, money, yes.
And you realize, yes, Uganda was called the Pearl of Africa by Winston Churchill, but what you know, to destroy nature, we still be the Pearl of Africa. No, we don't be. And
probably we may remain by name, but not in reality.
But not by reality. And then you look at this aspect that, yes, you know, let's really thank the government. By the time you have 506 forest reserves, and they have tried to change these Grim Reaper predictions that Uganda within 40 years will lose forests, and they're trying to fight so hard to prevent this. This is some really good work. But I believe by changing the perspective of people on trees, what we are doing right now. You see, a friend of mine told me that in the abundance of water,
yes,
the voles are still thirsty. It means that, as you talked about ignorance, so
yes,
look, it's an African say, but look at this in this way. You see, there is a lot of information there to look out for. But at times people do not intentionally look it up
yes,
because they feel like it's a burden or it's a bore. But now what we are doing, we're trying to tell them, guys, this is what's up. This is what we're trying to tell you. This is what we're trying to put across to you and tell you that, you know what? Number one, trees are really important. Trees are really good for the planet. You know that, when you look at the map of the world, you get to realize that the earth is actually so small.
so small, yeah.
It's not actually so small, is that the percentage of land itself is actually less. If they say 30% of the planet is land and 70% is water, now that 30% is what is accommodating the trees, the forests,
the people
and everything, the industries
world,
and everything. So if we get to know these facts, we have to first tell them, yes, now we have told them all the effects. You know, somebody, I was listening to Al Jazeera some time back.
yes,
I at this current rate, because you said that this does not start with one person,
Yes.
the process of global warming began at the Industrial Revolution from 1850 to current date, eh? Whereby now the planet is warming at 1 degree Celsius, and by 2030 it's going to be warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius. Yes, we can survive at 1.5 degrees Celsius, but I really wouldn't want to live in a planet that by 2030 is warming at a rate of 1.5 degrees Celsius. So, what can we do? Hmm? What needs to be done? Hmm? Number one, we talked about institutions that have really worked their way
Yes.
to make people to know the importance
And
of trees.
appreciate the importance of trees.
Number one, this is going to sound really interesting, but number one, if you look at every government ministry in Uganda, most especially look at the works of Ministry of Health.
Yes.
When it was World Health Day, what did the Ministry of Health do? They told people that if we do not fight for this environment that we have, if we cut down all the trees, what is this going to lead to? It's going to lead to a situation where the climate is warming and tropical diseases such as malaria are going to become an urgent thing that is going to affect the livelihoods of people in the society. Why? Because we believe that yes, one of the ways to reduce mosquitoes is by cutting down trees. But no, even if we cut down trees, the planet is going to keep on warming and it's going to favor the mosquitoes inbreeding, and
Yes.
you're going to have high cases of malaria. Actually realize during the hot season in the country,
The mosquitoes
were too many. I remember it's something you told me
even
that
now in a number of parts of the country they are hot and people are having the mosquitoes currently.
Yeah.
Because you know that at least when it's raining, this running water will always destroy the stagnant water and the breeding sites will be destroyed. So it reduces the rate of mosquitoes.
Yes.
And even when you're looking at the cancer, it can, we have seen that climate change can even have an impact on your skin, and it in a way contributes towards that kind of challenge. So there is a need for people to appreciate that these kind of effects come in the long run. Leaving alone the diseases and the other challenges, even if we are just to look at food insecurity, and it gets worse for African countries where we are depending on rain-fed agriculture, it really becomes a very big challenge, because when we see that, like in Uganda, over 80% of the people will depend on rain-fed agriculture. Even when you're in Kampala where you're not doing farming, somebody from Nakasongola, somebody from Barara must load for you the matoka and they bring it in Kampala for you to have what to eat. So at the end of the day, it's going to have a ripple effect on the food security within the country. It's going to have the ripple effect on the income standards. Because if you are getting money and all you are having, you have to spend it on food which is now expensive. It means that by cutting down the trees, it's going to affect the entire livelihood. It's going to affect the entire lives of the people. So it's something that has been treated with less attention, if I should say. The question of climate change has not been given the necessary attention that it deserves. And I would appeal actually that we need to awaken this call of climate change. It was more vibrant actually before COVID. You would really see that the government planning and the budgeting and all the programs were really focusing on climate change. But since the onset of the COVID-19, there was a bit of shift in the attention. But I think now that the COVID-19 is subsiding a bit, we need to reawaken the question of climate change, and we see how to sensitize the people and have more people appreciate the need to keep a better and healthy environment,
with trees being part of it.
Yes.
So when we talk about other organizations, if you look at what NEMA, National Forestry Authority, have done, these guys have really done a lot. They have planted a lot of millions of trees. Even non-government organizations, Tree Adoption Uganda and Food Tree Adoption, which is trying to get the word out there for people to know the importance of forests. You get to realize that despite all of this work, I think that it has to be up to people like us, like what we are doing now. We are not talking about this because we have the financial capability. No, we are trying to use the knowledge we have to let you know that, number one, if you cut down a tree, if you have a world which is not balanced, if you have a world that it's only development taking the highest percentage and nature taking becoming a backwash or taking a less percentage, you wouldn't want to be in such a world. Recently, when I was taking a ride across Interior Express Highway. There is one thing I actually love. The balance between nature and development is actually fascinating. We're talking about it here with Joseph, but we got to realize that if every project is done like that, whether it's oil drilling in the Albertine region, whether it's let me
Like a
say road
construction.
construction,
Yes.
even if you look at Mavira, by the way, do you know that these guys tried a little bit to maintain the forest part
Yes.
and where the road is
Yeah,
passing?
the road is.
There is that sense of beauty that you get. Eh? So I believe that if the model of development is nature plus development, you get a world that is beautiful and is
Yes.
worth living in. That would be good. Though, despite that, you realize that yes, the government can do all of these things, but we also have to look at the people today. So, it would always be good if, let me say, a person is constructing a house and you have enough space in your compound, please plant a tree, because that tree is going to provide for you shade, enable you have good air, and have a beautiful home. Though, then, you got, though we talk about all of these interventions, in life there are the haves
Yes,
and the
and
have
yeah,
nots.
they have notes. Yes.
So the haves may actually get the message that you're trying to put across. What about the have nots?
And the have nots becomes a bit of a challenge.
Mm.
But then I think usually what helps in such circumstances is that we usually policies are key.
Mm.
Like for example, you realize that I'll take an example during the COVID time.
Mm.
When the lockdown was there, it was not all about the having and the have-nots.
Mm.
It was a lockdown, whether you have or not, all of you have to start home, and it was a policy.
Mm.
And that shows you the importance of policy. For example, if we are having a policy and we are having these relevant policies,
Mm.
like currently you say, if you have to build, you must build with this plan, you must build such a structure, and even after construction, before the occupants take up the facility, or before the landlord begins to call on tenants, it must be inspected. So we know if the wiring has been done well, if the firefighting appliances like the fire extinguishers have been installed, like in those public buildings. It really helps whether you are poor or not. You must make sure that you meet the standard. What if we had favorable policies that are going to direct people's footsteps, whereby they know that before I walk here, I must be able to plant a tree. Before I cut these trees to put here my construction, I have to put up this kind of structure. So I think there is a need to look at the policies, but then also the policies will not be implemented without funding. So there is a need to look at climate change. I was really happy with the most recent budget that the Parliament of Uganda passed. At least there was a portion to address climate change. Yes, it's not big, but it's really a good indicator that there are deliberate efforts. And this becomes very important for African governments to prioritize the funding for the climate change. Because at the end of the day, even when you have policies, who are going to reach down on the ground to implement these policies without the funding, without the fuel? So the policy will be there, but it will not be significant. Meanwhile, leaving alone the government as an institution to the people at the individual level, I think we need to take an individual effort. Like the young people, this is an appeal. You have the social media, you have your phone, you have your mother at home. Parents at this time, they look at us as a source of information. When you come and you're telling them about sports, how Arsenal lost and how this team won, and you are telling them about the political demonstration and the other, please tell them also about cutting a tree. Because since we have the phones, I am very sure most of the adults, they are learning from the younger people. Please, what has happened? What was on Facebook? These days we even hear people say, I heard on Facebook. The man doesn't have Facebook on his phone, but he says, I heard on Facebook, because he was told, and so he believes. So the young people, we have the ability to influence people's thinking. We have the ability to influence the kind of information that the public out there has, because we have the gadgets, we have the social media. We must use it effectively. Please let us educate. But then how shall we educate if we don't have the knowledge? That's also a challenge. We need to get the knowledge as the young people.
Yes. When you're talking about using social media and using the skills people have, other people have music skills that they can really sing. So recently, I told this to my friends and they really laughed about it. So listening to a song and you really just love the aesthetic beauty, the flow of the rhythm and everything. So it's a song I listened to called Different World. It's by Alan Walker and Sophia Carson. So what really shocked me about this song, I was listening, this is not the world we have in mind. But I'm like, oh yeah, these lyrics are so good. They're good for my mind. They're good for everything. Like it's a song that I can hum to. It's a song that I can walk on. But
Yes.
watching the video, what were these people really talking about? This is not the world we have in mind. They were trying to tell us that you guys, you've literally destroyed the planet and you're having a world that is unbearable, or a world that you cannot live in. So, what am I trying to say? Many of us have music skills. Hmm? We can use these skills to pass on this information, because you people, do you know there are places where they tell you that these guys are suffering from climate change? In Uganda, we have the example of Bududa. Yeah?
Yes.
We have to thank the government for its intervention that it has put on ground by informing these
The
people,
people about
telling them to plant trees. Even other organizations that have tried to actually
take
help
an
the
effort.
take an effort and help the environment regenerate.
Yeah.
But people, if you think that cutting down a tree or the domino effect of deforestation, which later on leads to climate change, is something funny to laugh about, no, it isn't. It's something serious that is actually an existential threat to your livelihood. Because once this environment changes, you will have a lot of challenges. Because if that ozone layer is destroyed, that means that people are going to have a lot of eye problems. People are going to
Obviously.
have cancers. There are going to be hell of diseases. So remember that if you have the capability of passing on information, telling people the importance of a tree, telling people, maybe say planting a tree when you have the capability to. We are saying that destruction, chopping down the tree is an easiest thing, but watching it grow is one of the hardest things
Some
that you
of the
have to
hardest
see.
things. You have to be patient. You have to take time.
Mm,
And then it gets worse actually when you talk about diseases. It gets worse in Africa,
mm,
where we are seeing that most of the countries are struggling to survive. They are struggling to develop.
yeah.
Now imagine an Africa that is a victim of climate change, an Africa that can't produce food. Shall we even look at kicking the poverty out of Africa?
Yeah.
It means that all the efforts shall
Mm.
be watered down at the end of the day, because one, we can't provide food.
Mm.
So actually we shall fall out on all the SDGs,
Mm.
right away from food, fighting famine, fighting poverty, disease, like everything will just be around. You can imagine the ripple effect. When you cut a tree, just know you are watering down all the efforts, you are watering down all the sources that have been invested. But we need to understand this first before we can come to appreciate that. So I continue to appeal then to the civil society organizations. They are key into this fight. We are reaching out to the communities. What if all the civil societies that we have, they had the concept and they adopted the concept of climate change? That when you are in Gulu and you are working with an organization that is looking at addressing early pregnancies, you also educate them about climate change. When you are in the central region and you are working maybe in the slums, you are educating them about climate change. And maybe across the country, if we are just looking at the number of society organizations that we have, the NGOs, the CBOs, the national and the international, and we are adopting this concept of passing on the message of climate change to the people, I am very sure that we shall create a big impact. And then we shall be able to address the question of climate change and the question of food insecurity, because it's key. Imagine a Uganda without food. Imagine an Africa without food. But partly because we have cut down the trees, we have affected the rain cycle. Besides the fact that we depend on rain-fed agriculture, we can't do agricultural production. When we are receiving the rains, and now that's the unfortunate bit of it, is that usually we look at climate change as in having sunshine, having the dry spells, but also the other unfortunate bit is that climate change unfolds in different ways. Sometimes we shall have heavy rains that are going to destroy the crops.
Having floods.
Now, when you begin to tell someone that we are having floods because we have cut down the trees, it will really be hard to put the point at home, unless if someone has gone to school.
And remember, looking at agriculture in that, these trees act as the fact that their roots, their taproot systems are so strong,
Yes.
and they are able to hold the ground together. They actually, I think, if that concept of nitrogen fixing bacteria, I might have used it in another, but these trees help the ground to maintain its fertility and
Yes.
it being in whatever in contact
Intact.
intact.
Yes.
If you guys chop down a tree, if you see how people really remove a tree, people actually remove it from the root system, and you find that there's that soil that is always
Yes, they
falling.
uproot it and
Then if you imagine a whole forest is cut down and it rains
the
January,
water is going to run through.
that means that the land will lose its fertility, and then you would say, what have we done? So when remember, when you're cutting down a tree, plan to remember, if you're supposed to use firewood, yes, I accept the fact that firewood is one of the essential wood fuel that is necessary for some families to have food, but to, let me say, make a meal. But remember that there are also other alternatives. You can
Yes,
use
for households.
you can use let me say uh there's there are these things. Okay, there are these, I don't know how they call them.
Briquettes?
Those things,
Briquettes?
briquettes,
Yes.
to prepare food,
Yes.
because there you're actually reducing on
the quantity of
firewood
that
that
you
you
need.
that you
And
need.
actually, when you talk about that, I just imagine a scenario where you are having 10 trees within your land, or 10 trees around your house, and you simply have to get one branch off, a small branch, and you have to keep them to dry. And you're having a fuel saving stove. When you're having a fuel saving stove, you put in one piece of firewood, it will make a meal ready. Then tomorrow you're having another one piece that you got out as a branch. Because you're having 10 trees, it will mean that the environment still remains healthy, but also you can eat. Because at the end of the day, we shall not say that don't cut the trees, yet you need firewood. But plant as many trees as you can.
Yeah.
When you are getting firewood, don't cut down the whole tree. Pick a smaller branch. Pick another branch from one tree. So by the end of the day, by the time you will have finished cooking with these few branches you have picked from each tree, maybe they have taken you for 6 months, other branches have even grown.
Yeah.
So it's like the tree, it will keep regenerating itself. Meanwhile, you harvest from it.
Yeah.
So those can be some of the mechanisms that households can adopt. We have the question of the issue of the fuel saving stoves. Let us adopt these mechanisms. Now we have the issue of the people who are into the commercial food production, the people who are into chapati making, who are into baking, and someone must fill the whole stove with nearly half a sack of charcoal. It means that this person must go back tomorrow to buy another piece, a sack of charcoal. But what if they constructed these fuel saving stoves and they only have to put once, and that is going to take them through the whole process? So it's really an entire process that really invites the effort of everybody that we can come to appreciate. If I am going to the shop to do my shopping, to buy sugar, and I carry my shopping bag, and I reject a polythene bag, I call it the Cavera from the shop, how does it have an impact on the environment? I usually have that. When I'm going for shopping, I go with my shopping bag. I leave home carrying my money, knowing that I'm going to buy sugar. Knowing that I'm going to buy bread, I'll go with my shopping bag. So I reach there, you give me your polythene bag. I'm like, no, I don't need polythene bags at home. I have my shopping bag. Imagine if only 80% or even 50% of the people did that. It will mean that the market for polythene bags will die out naturally, and these countries will be kicked out naturally without even having to fight them. But as long as the demand for polythene bags is there, as long as the users of polythene bags are just increasing every other day, it will be hard to fight against these companies.
Yeah.
So it really takes an effort of everybody. It takes an entire effort of everyone. Surely, we want to thank you so much for having been with us as we are winding up. We really want to thank you for always following up, bringing up issues of Africa that matter, because we know that with the question of climate change, Africa is the #1 victim. Because we have our own issues already. We are struggling with the disease, we are struggling with the poverty, we are struggling with the food insecurity. Imagine having another such huge problem of climate change coming onto Africa. So we need really to work our way out of this, and I appeal to the government bodies, I appeal to the civil society organizations, I appeal to individuals, but most importantly, I appeal to the young people. We have a message to put across to the nation. We have a message to put across to all the African people, and we have a reason to cause an impact within our society.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Timo.
Yeah. So there is this mantra I picked up: step by step, shoulder by shoulder. You see, what me and him are doing right now is trying to pass on the message step by step, shoulder by shoulder. Meaning that if me and you know about the environment, know about trees, know the dangers, deforestation, deforestation, swap reclamation, all of these things have on the environment. We may have the opportunity to prevent this before it happens, prevent climate change before it happens. So remember, you're supposed to always know that the nature is part and parcel of human survival. For Africa, it's really part of us. It's nature that does everything for us, regulate the climate, enables us to have tourists, and enables us to have this great and beautiful environment we truly love. So, I would want to thank Joseph again
Yeah.
for giving me this opportunity to come onto his program, talk about deforestation, climate change, in relation to Africa as a whole. And I would also want to remind you to like, subscribe, and follow us on all our social media platforms. For any questions you want to ask, you can put
For
them on the
comment.
comment sections. We
Yes.
shall have a special program whereby we get back to you and we answer all of these questions you have in full force. Thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.
Thank
Ooh,
you. Bye.
bye.